back to Next Scene Podcast, the podcast taking on pop culture one scene at a time. I'm your host, Sean, and unfortunately, once again, my co-host Brian could not be with us tonight. And tonight is the fourth night of Hanukkah and the fourth episode of our very special Hanukkah special covering 8 episodes in 8 nights. Along with Brian, we also do not have a guest tonight, unfortunately, so we're going to be trying something different. It'll just be me flying solo. Just me and you, listener, together, just the two of us. And to that guest, I know you're listening, and no worries. I understood when I invited you on, it was going to be a long shot. I knew this particular potential guest had a lot going on this month, so I knew getting them in for a guest spot was going to be a long shot, and I tried for it. And sometimes those shots miss. So it's going to be just the two of us. So let's dig in. For the fourth night of Hanukkah, we are covering Lizzie McGuire from Season 2, Episode 20, Xtreme Xmas. This episode originally aired on the 6th of December, 2002, which coincidentally just happened to be the last night of Hanukkah. That year in 2002, Hanukkah was from the November 29th through to December 6th. And that's when this episode aired. We'll talk about my history with this episode is... I'd never seen this before, preparing for the podcast, and actually had never seen any episodes of Lizzie McGuire. I was heard of the show, I was aware of the show, but had never seen any episodes. So this was an introduction to the episode, as well as all the characters as well. So I think I was able to follow along, figure out who was what, and all that sort of stuff. But this is my first exposure. So yeah, let's jump right in. Let's get into it. So for opening our first scene, we've got a lineup of people waiting to meet Santa and helper elf. And, kind of turning the trope on its head. In this case, the people are giving the toys to Santa instead of getting them from. So it's a lineup of like a Toys for Tots thing. People are donating items for Santa to give away. And so Lizzie is there, and she's got a box of all noisy stuff. She's got like drums and a bugle and a siren. Turns out they're all things from her little brother that she's donating to get rid of those. And that's nice. And then we also get interest to the Jewish friend, to Gordo, who is Lizzie's Jewish friend. And we kind of talk later. So after talking about Santa and talking about what they're donating, they also talk about the main plot line for the episode is a Christmas parade, and Lizzie and friends and family are planning on making a rock and roll Christmas float for the parade. And Gordo chimes in. He says, Gordo the friend says, I'm in charge of decorating the tree on the float, right? Because frankly, I've mastered making dreidels and lighting menorahs, and I'm looking for a new challenge. So this is letting us know that Lizzie has a Jewish friend. Isn't that nice? Isn't it? Awfully nice of them to be inclusive like that. But I kid. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And I'm going to keep this train rolling. Following the credits, we get our second scene, which is Lizzie and gang working on building their rock and roll Christmas float. And then we've got a couple of mean girls. But apparently they're classmates of Lizzie. They swing by, and their dad is paying carpenters to build the float for them. So they're doing, they're job creators, I guess we could say. But so they're paying people to make their float while Lizzie is doing it all herself. And as we're working on the Christmas float, one of Santa helpers. One of Santa's helpers happens by. We've got one of Santa's elves. And they start talking about penguins. I'm still not. I've got the script in front of me, and I'm still not entirely clear how they've got around to penguins. But someone says, "Who doesn't love penguins?" And the elf chimes in, says, "We elves aren't too wild about them. Elves are allergic to penguins. My pal, Little Binky, turns red as a turkey gobbler," which doesn't make a lot of sense, because when would one of Santa elves run into a penguin, being that Santa's workshop is up on the North Pole and penguins live entirely in the southern hemisphere, Antarctica and southern tip of Argentina and islands and so forth in the South Pacific. But penguins entirely Southern Hemisphere, North Pole, Northern Hemisphere are, how often are elves running into penguins that they know about this? They know about this allergy. So I thought that was strange. But anyway, so this elf introduces himself to Nobby, and he'll be around an awful lot for someone who should be much busier this close to Christmas. Then we've got an introduction of another running gag, and I don't know if it's just this episode or the series, but somehow Mom is always walking around with a plate of cookies. So as the work continues on the float, Mom pops in and says, "Oh, I made cookies. I've got gingerbread Santas, and in honor of Hanukkah, I made potato pancakes." Gordo's a comment. He's like, "Thanks. I can't get away from those. Every December, that's all I eat." But some more inclusivity. They toss a line in. So we'll see. In the end, we'll see how this scores. If all that tokenism pays off in terms of the Hanukkah representation. Then after a little bit of chit chat and the elf Nobby introduces himself, he ends up taking out the family for lunch. He knows an incredible Chinese place, and Lizzie is left to work alone on her float. But the family heads off with Nobby, and they just leave her to work alone. And our next scene is Lobby walking in on Nobby putting Christmas under the tree. And her brother comes in, is trying to bribe the elf. I guess the implication is he was not so nice this past year, and perhaps a little bit naughty. But he's got to work on his technique. First, he tries to bribe Nobby with hot chocolate, and then we see him slipping him some cash. But he's like waving the bills around in the air when, we clearly know what he's got to do is fold it up and palm it so he can pass it to Nobby. Shaking his hand, kind of be more surreptitious. He's too out in the open, which of course is not going to work. But Nobby is so popular that the family's invited him to stay over, and we find out the plumbing is busted at his retirement home, so he's got nowhere to stay till it's fixed, which is odd because he seems to be claiming, at least portraying himself as an active elf. So if he's not retired from elfing, should he be in a retirement home? But anyway, he's staying over, and Lizzie doesn't care. She just wants to get the float done. And I think that's kind of the main thing. We've got the Nobby stuff, we've got the float stuff, we've got some Hanukkah, a little bit of Hanukkah in the background, kind of established all the plot lines for the episode. The next scene is pretty much all montage. We show the family decorating the house for Christmas. We see them sitting down for a meal with Nobby, and a lot of interludes of people trying to cut fruitcake. So I've heard of fruitcake. I've seen fruitcake. I've never actually tried to cut a fruitcake. I don't know if they're hard to cut, but that seems to be the implication. We go back to that several times. And I forgot to mention, during the montage, we do get a cut to Nobby and Matt, Lizzie's younger brother, playing with dreidel. So we get a little bit more Hanukkah content there. The two of them playing with a dreidel. We end up with a singing of the 12 Days of Christmas, and then the entire family volunteering to head over to the retirement home to help with the plumbing, because apparently they know something about plumbing. Hey, Dad's got tools, right? So they're all going to head out, and then the family's heading out, leaving Lizzo and Gordy to work on the float. So more distractions that are keeping this float from getting done. And so our next scene is we cut to, it's just Lizzie and Gordo, and he's going to head out. He's like, Nobby and his friends, and the plumbing is more important than Lizzie's float, Christmas float. And just to drive this point home 3 different times, Lizzie says, "What about my float, Gordo? What about my float?" Says that 3 times and doesn't register. He's got different priorities. He heads out. And with that, I'm going to wrap up Act 1. I think that's where the first commercial lies. The copy of the video I have doesn't have commercials, so sometimes it's obvious, sometimes I kind of got to guess. So I'm calling that the end of Act 1. And so we'll go to the question that I usually ask of my guests, And that is, is this a true Hanukkah special, or is this, really a Christmas episode with a Jewish friend? And, this show is actually the inspiration for that category, because I think this is a canonical example of a Christmas episode, and they just toss in, oh, here's a Jewish friend. So, yeah, I don't think this is a Hanukkah special, but I want to give a shout out, go back to my guest, and thank them for suggesting this episode. So I, kind of listed out a bunch of different Hanukkah episodes that I found or that I knew about, and kind of let people choose, potential guests choose their own episode that they were interested in. And our guest wasn't necessarily a fan of this episode, but was a fan of the program and wanted to talk about Lizzie McGuire in general. And so that caused me to go back and rewatch, because originally I'd watched it and thought, well, this is a Christmas episode. There really isn't much Hanukkah here. Not good for the show. And, because of this guest, I said, well, hey, if that's what you want to talk about, we can talk about it. And I went back and rewatched to prepare, expecting just to find more things to complain about and how it wasn't really a Hanukkah episode. And then I saw, more instances. There's a couple more references to Hanukkah than I thought there were, which is not a huge thing. But the bigger thing I thought there was, the way things wrap up, the ending of the program did have some Hanukkah spirit. So in a sideways, it was not entirely inappropriate to be listed as a Hanukkah episode. It wasn't quite as bad as I originally thought. Not great, not good, but just not as bad. So I don't give it high marks for qualifying as a Hanukkah special. I do think this is a Christmas special with a Jewish friend, but it's a little bit better or less bad than I originally thought. So let's cut back to our action for Act 2. So we open up, I suppose this is pretty soon after Gordo leaves to help out with the plumbing. And Lizzie is continuing to work on the float all by herself, and she is out of energy. She's running down. She is falling asleep. So she ends up saying, I can stay awake. I can finish this. I can take a little nap. And so she dozes off, and that leads to our next scene, which is a dream sequence. And so Lizzie is there's a little bit of a Christmas Carol worked into here, a little bit of It's a Wonderful Life. I think she's dreaming of the elf and different spirits that come to her, but are played by her friends and families. They talk about Gordo shows up as the elf who wants to be a dentist. He didn't want to make toys. He wanted to be a dentist because helping people is what it's all about. And Nabi is there to guide Lizzie through this dream. He's a bit of the Marley of this episode, I guess. And then he introduces the ghost of Christmas Past. And it's Lizzie's mother playing the ghost of Christmas Past. And she's pointing out how messy Lizzie's room is. And would it kill her to clean it up once in a while? And then I think her final spirit, or no, the penultimate, the next to final spirit shows up. And it's Matt. It's her little brother. And here we get a telling of the Christmas tale. He's talking about shepherds watching over their flock, talking about a child who shall be savior, and earth and peace and goodwill, and all about that. So going back to the question of, is this a Hanukkah episode? Not only do we not get a retelling of the Hanukkah story, we actually get one of the few episodes that explicitly gives us the Christmas story. Talks about the birth of the Savior and angels and stuff. So that's good for a Christmas special. Not so important to Hanukkah specials. And then the final episode, or the final spirit showing up, is his dad, is her father, who insists he really would make a great wise man, but he is quickly cut out of this dream sequence as Lizzie has come to the realization that it's, she shouldn't care about winning something for herself. Christmas is about doing good for others. So she should be over at Nabi's retirement home, helping the family out with the plumbing. So she's come around, she's seen the light, and the spirit did it all in one night, just in time. So, there's still time. She can head over and help with the plumbing. So then we cut over to the basement at Nabi's retirement home, where the family's starting around, talking about pipes, and Lizzie shows up, and they realize, she won't be able to get her float done if she's there helping them. But she says, she's seen the light, that, this is, the pipes are more important than winning the prize. So they get down to it, and they all work together. So that wraps up our second act, and I'll ask that question of myself that I usually ask the guests, and that is, does this episode capture the spirit of Hanukkah? And I started alluded to that a little bit earlier, where I do think it does, because we'll see in this third act, there's a bit of a miracle. So I think that matches. I think the overall message is definitely Christmas, and most of the iconography of the episode is also focused on Christmas. But I think there is a way you could look at this ending, the miracle that occurs, and kind of tie it into the miracle of Hanukkah. I mean, it doesn't last 8 days, but I think the point is that there's a miracle, that help comes from a potentially divine source, unsought and unexpected. And Hanukkah is all about miracles, or usually. So I'm going to take this time to give a little bit more background and a little bit more on the history of Hanukkah. And when I've been talking about the spirit of Hanukkah, or the kind of just Hanukkah in general, there's like two parts to it. So to the story, so there's the battle, there's the people being oppressed by a foreign leader and rising up and winning a battle against oppression. And then there's the second part on the aftermath, where they've got to fix things up. They've got to reconsecrate the temple that's been trashed by the enemy, and they've got to keep this oil burning for 8 days, or they've only got enough oil for 1 day. It ends up burning 8 days. A miracle occurs, and there's that part. And I think these days, at least in my experience, the focus is more on the miracle. That the holiday is why is this a holiday? We don't we don't celebrate every military victory, and certainly not for 8 nights. It seems like the focus for that is the miracle, but that was not always the case. It's actually a few centuries after this occurs that we get the first recorded references to a miracle occurring. So these events happened about 200 years BCE, and this is stuff these are stories that are not in the Bible. So this is the Torah, the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament had been written at this point. So this is well after that. Although this is referenced in the New Testament. There's talk of Jesus attending a feast of dedication, which is celebrating the dedication, the rededication of the temple after the Maccabees won the war. So it happens around that period, and then so originally it's a celebration of the victory. The first book of Maccabees describes an 8-day celebration following the rededication of the temple. So kind of the first writings we get on this event, again, they don't reference the oil or a miracle occurring, and their celebrations, their holiday is about the military victory. And then it's actually it's not until a few hundred years later, I think it was about 400 years later, that we see the evolution into a holiday that is more celebrating this miracle of this oil lasting 8 days. And there's a couple different theories, or a few different theories on why this is and what factors are involved. And one theory is with Jews remaining to be a minority population, a minority people in diaspora, that it may not be good to have a holiday kind of celebrating a military victory. Maybe you don't want to seem like an antagonist, so maybe focus on a different aspect of those events to seem less dangerous. But then I also think, I wonder if, going back to the mention in the New Testament, if the influence of Christianity kind of changes the approach and the thinking of Jews, because God certainly changed. The New Testament God is a God of peace, and Jesus is the King of peace. So they're all very peaceful. But that Old Testament God, he had some wrath. He was out to he had some vengeance. He would punish. He would kill the firstborn. He would flood the world. This God didn't mess around, this Old Testament God. So I kind of see, could see some parallels there to say, in a more, in a time with a more militant God, you celebrate the military victory, and with a different take on God or a different personality, maybe the holiday takes on a different personality. Celebrate the sort of the peaceful miracle after the victory, and not the military activity before. So what we call the spirit of Hanukkah has evolved over time, and I think the spirit. So I'll take both things into consideration when considering the spirit of Hanukkah. So the spirit can be a miracle to occur, like the miracle with the oil, or the spirit can be overcoming our oppressors, overcoming an oppressor, overcoming an enemy, achieving a victory. That can also be part of the spirit. Kind of take both those things into consideration. Okay, so jumping back into the action, we are in our final act, and our next scene is the Christmas parade. We've heard so much about it, and here it is. But anyway, so we're out at the Christmas parade. We see the floats going by. We see there's a marching band, and there's a marching band playing the Carol of the Bells, which I mention only because there are no bells. So I guess suppose if you can have a Hanukkah episode with very little Hanukkah, you can have Carol of the Bells with absolutely no bells, which I thought that was weird. So we have the mean girls are back, the ones that were having their father pay to have their float built. One of them says, "We dropped by the warehouse last night, saw your float. Why isn't it out by the trash can?" And Lizzie, takes the high road. She just gives them a Merry Christmas to you too, right back. What a gal. But anyway, so Lizzie was helping the family with the plumbing all night, and never got a chance to head back to finish up her float. So I don't think she's expecting anything to roll. She's there purely as a spectator, when suddenly, what's that? The announcer announces, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, the next float, Rock and Roll Christmas" by Lizzie McGuire. And she says, there's no float there. Like, she didn't get to finish it. And Gordo says, "Somebody did." And suddenly we see the Rock and Roll Christmas float, as envisioned by Lizzie McGuire, is rolling down the street, and Santa has turned into Steven Tyler, who is on the float singing "Santa Claus is Coming to Town." And it's funny. I kind of go back and forth if I like this. And then Gordo, the friend, is in the crowd and says, "So you're saying that Santa Claus finished your float and then turned into Steven Tyler from Aerosmith to perform on it? I did not see that coming." And I don't know how I feel about them calling out that's Steven Tyler from Aerosmith who's singing "Santa Claus is Coming to Town," because they never address him being Steven Tyler like the rest of the show. And it's obviously, whenever we see Santa, it's Steven Tyler. Like, he's wearing a Santa suit, but he's not really making an effort to hide who he is. So this is a world where people don't recognize Steven Tyler. Steven Tyler doesn't exist. If Aerosmith does not exist in this Lizzie McGuire universe, until he does, and suddenly everybody recognizes him. So I don't know. I don't know. Do I like them addressing, kind of the Steven Tyler in the room to say, yes, we know it's Steven Tyler? Or does that just raise more questions about why they didn't know before now that it was Steven Tyler? This episode gave me a lot to think about. There's certainly a lot more to it than I saw on first viewing. So, that's nice. So the final question that I would be asking our guest is, is this suitable for a yearly rewatch or watching as part of a holiday tradition? And I'm going to say no. If we're talking specifically in terms of Hanukkah, this is not going on my list. It does pretty well as a standalone episode. I didn't feel too left out by not having seen anything else of the series. It does end on a positive note. We do get the feel-good moment at the end. We do get the miracle, which I think puts it in, gives it a little bit of Hanukkah spirit at least. We get mentions of menorahs and latkes, and we see dreidel. So there's kind of like mandatory coverage. So it feels like they're checking boxes. So I give them half points for that. I think I'm going to come down. I'm going to say like 2.5 out of 5 stars. Kind of put this right in the middle. It was good. It was entertaining. Just not enough Hanukkah for me. Is where I'm going to leave with that one. And so that will wrap it up. You know what? I'll give a little story. Not a childhood memory of Hanukkah, but just something about the Maccabees. So those band of feisty Jews who fought back the Syrians and retook their temple. How do we think about them, and how do we look about them? Because so apparently in academic circles, there's some questions about these Maccabees and some controversy over how they should be considered. So traditionally, the line in the Hanukkah story is, they battled against, the impressive rulers from outside. But they're a small group, sort of a militant minority of Jews at that time. So there is some scholarship that suggests that this conflict was more akin to like a civil war. That this was sort of an extreme. An extreme part of the population fighting against a different part of the same population, but one that had been more assimilated. And that was the real conflict between assimilated Jews and potentially, a group we today might call extremists. And that was the real conflict, not Jews versus Syrians. So I'll just leave that nugget out there that there's some questions. So that'll wrap it up for us. And I do want to thank our guest who could not join us tonight. Did inspire me to go back and give this episode another watch and another consideration. So thank you for that. Listeners, thank you for listening. Please come back tomorrow night for night 5 of Hanukkah. We will be talking about New Girl. So check that out, and we will see you then on The Next Scene.